Our anime begins looking like a typical American breakup, with the woman stabbing the boy multiple times in the stomach. The guy was chilling, taking a lot of stabs while staring at the moon, and he says his name was Tomoku and Kanata, but his name didn't matter anymore. He says the only thing that mattered was that he truly died that day suddenly. Then he opens his eyes and it's day 1, and when he does, he sees an old goblin in front of him. The ma gets very confused, wondering where he was and why that old guy was looking at him, and who that green old guy was. Then the goblin says he's going to call the big guy next to our MC Gob Kishi, and looking at our MC, the old guy says he'll call him Gobro. Just as the mech is about to complain about his name, the old man puts a gross insect inside the guy's mouth. The ma couldn't do anything because he said he was very sleepy. So we arrive at day 2, and the mech says that when he woke up on day 2, he realized he was surrounded by green and ugly babies, but the plot twist is that he also realized he was one of them, and that's how he realized he really died and was reborn as a goblin. Upon realizing this, he started crying like a real baby. Then we move on to day 3, and he realizes that goblins grow too fast because he was already big, and after a good night's sleep, his body grew a lot. He says it didn't matter where he was or who he was. What mattered was that he got a second chance at life, and he says he will survive with all his might. Then we move on to the 4th day, and that old guy appears again with a pot full of insects, disgusting creatures, man, and the old guy says this is the last food they'll receive from him, and from now on they'll have to get their own food. After they fill their bellies, the big guy goes out, and not only him but Gob Kishi too, and he looks up at the sky and notices several scary birds there, also plants he had never seen in his life. So he realizes that this was really a different world from the one he knew. So the mech turns to Gob Kish and calls him by his name. However, Gob Kish wondered where he got that name from, but the mech ended up introducing himself as Gobo. And so, after a few days, the mech teamed up with this Gob Kish since he was the biggest boy among the goblins. He did all this with only one intention, which was to help the mech hunt since the dude isn't dumb or anything, right? So they start hunting a horned rabbit and manage to catch it. However, Gob Kish almost ate the rabbit alone, but Gobo starts hitting the poor guy, saying it was to share with him. And once the mech taught the guy how to share, he ended up taking the rabbit's horn to see if he could make a weapon out of it. Suddenly, in his vision, some phrases appeared saying something like, Gob obtained a small creature horn, and he gets confused, asking what appeared on his face. But before he could even figure it out properly, the other guy was already drooling behind him, wanting to eat that rabbit. So they both start dividing the rabbit's meat and eating, and Gob Kish was so happy, man, that he was eating and crying, thanking Gobo. So we arrive at day 5, and they were already hunting with much sharper synchronization. And as Gobo takes a horn from that rabbit, another message appears, saying he obtained a medium creature horn. Again, he wonders what that was about, but Gob Kish wonders what he was talking about. He says it was nothing and tells them to go eat. And as he was eating, a message appears saying evasion, and at that moment, Gobo realizes something. He remembers his past life. In his past life, he had an ability called absorption, which was a very rare ability he was born with in his old world. Basically, with this ability, he could eat anything iron, gold, or even poison, and had a chance to acquire the characteristics of whatever he ate. He says, unfortunately, it seems he lost all the other abilities he had in his past life. But he considers himself lucky to have obtained this unique ability in this life as well, since many monsters were lurking in that new world. So we arrive at the 6th day, where a goblin girl appears in front of Gobo and Gob Kish, impressed that they were eating horned rabbits. She introduces herself as Gob Miai and mentions that a boy died yesterday after being gored by one of these rabbits. She then gets close to our MC, cheeks all red, asking if he was Gobo and saying he was really amazing. She also starts praising him excessively, saying he was intelligent, handsome, and very strong. Gob Kish wonders, but what about me? What am I? And without even looking at him, she says he's just normal. Poor Gob Kish, right? And Armik wastes no time, asking if Gob Miai wants to hunt with them tomorrow. Gob-mi is so happy with the invitation that she jumps on him, hugs him, and says she will. So we reach the 7th day, and they couldn't hunt because it was raining too much, so they postponed the hunt with Gob-mi for tomorrow. The Mick decides to see what they had stored since he was planning to make a new weapon. When he opens the storage, he is surprised. But the scene changes, and he was smashing a mysterious crystal with a stone. He says that when he entered the storage to find things to make weapons, he found a group of human women imprisoned, and he quickly realized why they were there, but he preferred not to think about it. Suddenly, the old goblin appears, saying he was very motivated. The Mick says that guy was Gobig, the one who held him when he reincarnated, and gave him the random name Gobiru. He was the oldest in that cave, and the old man says he could level up faster than expected. The Mick wonders what level he was talking about, and the old man teaches him how to check his level. When the Mick imitates the old man, he realizes he's level 86, and the old man says if he reaches level 100, he can evolve into a more advanced form. Despite this, he still looks like a goblin. Among dozens, the Mick says goblins grow very fast, and that old, frail guy was only in his 20s. Man, so if I were a goblin, I'd be like that old guy. The old man says the young ones from the village should be back soon. With that, our mech will come as what's called a ruby goblin evolved, and he was eager to see what kind of prey they would bring this time. After saying this, the old man starts laughing wickedly and walks away. So we reach the 8th day. And the three of them were hunting in perfect synchronization, with Gob-mi providing long-range support, Gobo at medium distance, and Gob-kish as the group's attacker. This formation was working perfectly for them, and when Gob-mi eats that meat, she starts crying, saying she hadn't eaten anything but fruits until now. When Armik eats that meat, he learns a new ability called thermography. He also gains poison resistance, poison perception, and a bad eye. He starts smiling, saying that snakes seem to have a higher level than his. Gob-kish then asks if he could eat the snake's head, but the Mick says no, as it was too poisonous, and if they both ate it, they would surely die. The Mick then thinks that no matter how ugly he looked in this world, he would survive since this was his second chance at life. On the 9th and 10th days, they prepared all the equipment and went on a usual hunt. Then, on the 11th day, they made a mistake by exploring a cave out of curiosity, the kind of character that dies first in horror movies. They were attacked by numerous bats, but using Gob-kish's shield and Gobo's bad eye, they managed to defeat some of the bats. The scene changes, and they were already eating the meat of those bats. Armik learned echolocation, vampirism, and vampire skills. However, some goblins were watching them eating various types of meat, and they were very hungry. So we reached the 12th day at night. When they were all sleeping, some goblins ended up attacking Gobo while he was asleep, all of them armed with sticks. But he had his perception skill activated all the time. So Gobo wakes up and beats up all those goblins, and one of them couldn't take it and died right there. The Mick says it happened so fast that he didn't adjust his poison skill properly. Iso Deksu to do's os outrose goblins choke. When the Mick says they all need to learn a lesson too, Dom appears behind him with a very scary aura and starts beating them up, almost killing them. The Mick even tells her to take it easy on them. So, we move on to the 13th day, and it shows that they managed to kill a humanoid pig with a little difficulty, but the Mick was still shocked by the previous night's attack. So, he ends up receiving a new skill, libido, and also orc language detection and analysis. He then asks the other two if they were full, and they say they are. The Mick says they'll carry all that meat back to the cave. When they get there, he throws a bunch of meat around those goblins, telling them to eat. They are hesitant at first, asking if they could really eat, and the Mick assures them they can, that's why he brought it. So, they all start eating happily. The Mick thinks in his previous world, he would never help the helpless like this, and maybe it's not just his appearance that changed, but also him inside. While our protagonist sleeps, a notification emerges, announcing that level thresholds have been surpassed, triggering special instinctual conditions for domination and distinct movement. A window appears asking if he wants to evolve, yes or no. He's so sleepy that he just chooses yes and goes back to sleep without thinking twice since he didn't understand anything. It says Gobo received the blessing of the great god of conclusion and origin. So, on the 14th day, when Gobo wakes up, he realizes his body has completely changed, and he looks a bit more humanoid, resembling his past life. But not only he has undergone this change, but also Gob-Kish, the old guy. He's impressed that both of them have already evolved, and they weren't even born a month ago. Gob-Kish says he wants to test his strength, but he wants to test it by fighting Gobo. So they start fighting, and the exchange is very intense and balanced for a long time. But Gobo says Gob-Kish is too slow and ends up knocking him down. Gob-Kish then says Gobo was very strong, but Gobo claims Gob-Kish had much more strength than him. Suddenly, Gobir notices something coming very fast towards them. The scene changes, and there were many giant wolves hunting those horned rabbits, not even sparing the poor doer who got caught up in it. Gobo then says they were perfect enemies to test their skills against, and the three of them start fighting all those wolves. However, they manage to defeat them all, even the leader. Gobo starts devouring the meat of that leader and gains a new ability called Wild Hunt. He also learns leather armor and command skills. So they take the wolves' bodies back to the cave. But Gob says that everything they eat, they have to return in the same amount. The goblins kneel and ask him to teach them the tricks of killing. After thinking it over, Gob agrees to train them all. Everyone is very happy, and Gobo finally decides what he will do in that world. To continue getting stronger. We begin the second episode on the 17th day with Goboru asking Gobjai to wake up, because something terrible had happened. Unfortunately, all the human women in that place had left in the most tragic way possible, perhaps because they had lost hope, and so the boy joins Gobjai and holds a silent funeral for them while they cremate them. A few days passed, and soon we were on our 26th day with Gabu running around with other goblins who were being trained by Goboru, who was of the same generation as him. And in the meantime he took the opportunity to eat promising enemies he came across in order to learn new skills. Gobjai was a little worried at first, and while Goboru was already preparing to attack them, Gobjai explained to Goboru that they were actually from the same group as him, the Incursion group, who are basically the parents of Goboru's generation. And then they start exchanging a lot of ideas while leaving young human girls tied up on the ground, and we can see that the problem with goblins and humans is quite serious. After all, the goblins at all times seem to be Machiavellian with the humans, with one approaching and saying that they seemed so healthy and that they arrived at a good time because they lost the previous batch. Goboru thinks that the goblins' DNA is so strong that mating with other species still leads to the birth of goblins. He understood the instinct to reproduce, but he didn't want anything bad to happen to those young human girls. He really didn't feel good about it, and seeing that the other goblins are a bit weird towards them. Goboru decides to ask if it's okay for him to look after them, and the goblin doesn't like the question at all and grabs him by the collar of his shirt, asking him who he thinks he is, and says that he's just a brat who's just been born. And at that, some goblins get apprehensive seeing that and start to get into battle position, and the old man Gobjai sees all that in a cold sweat. Poor guy. And suddenly, two goblin girls arrive telling the two of them to calm down, because they didn't want to end up in the middle of this internal fight, and Goboru asks Gobjai who those two girls are, and Gobjai answers him by saying that they are Hobsato and Hobse, and one of them asks if they wouldn't like a duel between the leaders of each generation so that the winner can decide what the village will do from now on, but the duel would be without the use of weapons. And the bigger goblin says, "That's fine with me, this kid needs to learn a lesson." And Goboru says he has nothing against it either, and they both end up agreeing to the goblin's proposal. After everything has been decided, Goboru beats the crap out of the other goblin, teaching him a lesson, and even trapping him with a kind of web that comes out of his finger that he has learned to produce thanks to the daimonic spider. And then Goboru asks, "This officially makes me the leader of this village. Anyone want to complain?" And no one says a word. And then he puts the young human girls in a locked room, saying that he had already made it clear to everyone that they shouldn't lay a hand on them, and that he didn't intend to do anything either and would just look after them, and said that one day he would return them to a human town. And one of them asks him, "But then what do we have to do for you?" And clearly he was thinking, "I saved them, and there was an interest of mine in that." And that was their human knowledge. They were part of a group of merchants who ended up being attacked by goblins during their journey through Goblin country, and all the men were killed, and the 5 were the only survivors. They all start crying, and he leaves. On the 28th day, one of the girls says good morning as he goes to deliver food, and he thinks to himself, it's not that they've gotten over everything that's happened, but that they've accepted that it's better to face everything in a positive way. He cooked for them with ingredients and utensils that were among the spoils. You need to eat to live, and good food can be like a medicine to cure your mental state. Humans don't evolve like goblins, so they end up perfecting something to have an occupation. In that group of 5 girls, the quiet girl is an appraiser and blacksmith. The twins are from the kitchen and tailoring, and the girl with glasses is an alchemist. While the brave redhead who greeted him in the morning could be a novice warrior, but she wouldn't be much help now. Later Goblin would make her take part in the training, saying that age didn't matter, and from now on, it would depend on their strength, ordering them to do push-ups. But some of them can't take it anymore, and Goblin asks, "What, did you only survive until today because you were lucky?" Instead of sending them out to hunt, Goblin sent them out to do group exercises and also to teach them the rules he had set. We arrived on the 31st day. It was raining a lot, and Goblin and Gubkichi were having a very serious training duel. Goblin was enjoying Gubkichi's performance, who at that moment was asking his leader to come up, and the leader was saying, "That's how it should be." And all the other Globins were joining in, watching the leader and one of the members practicing together. After training, something happened that night. Goblin was lying in his bed until he decided to get up. The goblins came to where the 5 humans were, but Goblin attacked them all and tied them up. And when he heard some nonsense from one of them, he hit him again, went towards the girls and apologized to them for making them afraid, and the redhead began to cry and hugged him. But at that very moment other goblins arrived worried because they heard the noise and asked what had happened. And Goblin said that they had arrived at the right time, and that Gubkichi could drag those other goblins out of there. And then he asked Gobmi to wake up the others and gather everyone together, saying that they needed to see what he was about to do. Everyone was standing outside in the rain, just watching Goblin torture those who didn't obey his rules, and then Goblin asked, "Now you understand the rules of our village, right, everyone?" And everyone nods in fright. And then he dismisses everyone, and in the end, all those who broke the rules ended up being beaten to death, including the one who received the worst punishment, Hobkin, who died the next morning. We arrive at the 32nd day and see the goblins shooting at a tricorn that has very resistant scales. It doesn't like being attacked very much and tries to fight back. But the Goblin unleashes its webs through its fingers to hold the animal down. Gubkichi then went to the tricorn to attack it together with Goblin. They ended up killing it. Goblin thought it was a difficult opponent, and they used its flesh to feed themselves, and by eating the tricorn's flesh, Goblin learned the following skills: Eskamati horse neigh, accelerated healing, kick proficiency, improved charge, and triple stomp. And then he decides to test these skills and is very impressed with the triple stomp, as it is a single blow that causes 3 impacts, and for Goblin this was proof of what a difficult opponent the tricorn horse was. Next, we see Goblin lying in his bed, when suddenly the red-haired girl lies in the same bed as him, and he thinks that last night must have been very scary for her, so she covers up by letting her stay the night with him. On the 33rd day, Goblin wakes up. He notices that the Gobmi have joined them on the opposite side. They used his arm as a pillow, and so he was in a lot of pain. Then the goblins are impressed that the Gobu who was carrying the goblins' equipment has suddenly evolved into a hobgoblin, just like the level they were on, and training was going well. Gubkichi was the captain of the heavy protection warriors, and Gobmi commanded the long-range attack unit. Hobesato dealt with the mobility and light protection group. Gabu took over the rear support that prioritizes diverse tasks. Hobse is the only mage in the village. She was going to act as captain of our magical force, but so far there is no one else but her. Goboru decided that day to leave the training in the hands of the captains, while he went deeper into the forest to eat a variety of prey. On the way, he came across another tricorn and thought it was worth the risk, so he unleashed a skill to kill the tricorn and ended up ripping its head off. After defeating the tricorn, he thinks he might have gotten a bit arrogant after using attack magic for the first time. After that, he heads north into the forest and ends up going far away, until he sees a gigantic trail of blood, and then he remembers a goblin telling all the children like him at the time never to enter the northern forests. Deep down there lived a huge scarlet creature called a red bear, and he was right where that goblin had told him not to go, and he followed the trail of blood to see what it was, and it was a tricorn, and he was worried because the tricorn's armor is extremely resistant, and yet the horse was killed, when suddenly a gigantic creature appeared, and to Goboru's misfortune, it was the red bear that he had been told to avoid. Anyone with common sense would have run, but he had a plan to take down that huge creature, because he wanted to win and eat the meat to get more skills, and he goes towards the creature unleashing a skill with everything he has to take it down. We see Gobmi looking at nothing, and a goblin asks her what happened, and Gobmi replies worried because Goboru hasn't come back yet, so they decide to ask other goblins if they've seen him around. Gobkichi says he hasn't seen him, because he was training all the time. Then she asked the purple-haired goblin if she had seen him, and she said that she didn't know where he was, but she also said that Goboru is very strong, and that there was no reason to worry. Then she asked a magician who had spent the whole day reading a book on magic and hadn't seen Goboru either. Meanwhile, Goboru was fighting the red bear, and the bear, in order to defend itself against the magic cast by Goboru, sacrificed its arm, which left Goboru stunned. The bear is so strong that it seems easy to uproot a tree. Goboru is worried about being hit by its claws, as the armor he acquired by eating the tricorn probably wouldn't do much good. So he goes after the bear again and attacks it. But it doesn't do much good as the bear is extremely tough and ends up hitting him so hard that Goboru flies away. He gets very angry and throws a lot of web at the bear, which gets covered in web and quickly manages to get rid of it by throwing a giant fireball towards Goboru. And thanks to their battle, a fire starts in the forest, and the bear starts chasing Goboru through the dense forest, who is hiding while he heals himself with his own ability, thinking that he had never heard of a bear that spat fireballs in his past life, and then he decides to get back into the fight, because he really wants to defeat something that is feared by his fellow human beings, and so he runs towards the bear, which starts spitting fire at him, and he tries to resist the damage and even uses a shield made of water to get close to it, saying that it is resistant, but if it attacks him inside the mouth, and he hits him in the mouth. But it's not much use because the bear attacks him and sends him flying again, and this time he's badly wounded and spitting blood, but he thinks it's a draw because his blade was inside his mouth and he couldn't spit fire again. The bear doesn't even give a sign that he's going to fall, but Goboru would die with just one more attack from him, meaning Goboru is at an extreme disadvantage. But for him, that only makes the meal tastier. After he defeats that bear, the bear tries to attack him, but he dodges and counterattacks it, and he goes into combat with the bear again, and unfortunately the bear rips his arm off, and we arrive at the 34th day. Goboru is all wounded on the ground, with the bear's paw stuck in his body. He ended up winning. He takes the bear's paw and starts to eat it. In this, he receives the following skills: heavy damage and overwhelming strength. His level values have been exceeded. Now that the special conditions, Assassin of Champions, Conqueror's Stance, and God have been met, evolutionary advancement to Ogre Rare Species is available. And so he decided to make the evolution. If you want part 3 of this anime when it comes out, just comment on part 3 and leave lots of likes. Subscribe to the channel to support the videos. Until the next video.